The true date of Jesus Christ's birth. When we think of Jesus' birth, the image that comes to mind is almost automatic. A cold winter night, snow falling gently in European artistic representations, and the baby Jesus wrapped in warm, swaddling clothes in a manger, celebrated on December 25th. This date is so ingrained in our culture, our hymns, and our liturgy that we rarely stop to question its historical accuracy. However, when we open the Bible and begin to act as history detectives, examining the clues left by the evangelists Luke and Matthew, as well as Jewish customs and the Roman context of the time, we realize that the scenario changes drastically. The Bible, curiously, does not tell us the exact date of Christ's birth. There is no verse that says, "And Jesus was born on such and such a day of such and such a month." That in itself is a lesson. Perhaps God did not want us to idolize the day. However, the scriptures are not silent. They leave us chronological and climatic breadcrumbs that, when followed carefully, take us away from December and bring us closer to a very specific time of year. This video does not aim to diminish the beauty of traditional Christmas, but rather to deepen our understanding of the reality of the Incarnation, revealing a prophetic richness that often goes unnoticed. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and share the video, the climatic evidence and the Roman sense. The first and most obvious clue we have against the date of December is found in Luke's account, chapter 2, verse 8. There were in that same region shepherds out in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. This seemingly simple passage contains a meteorological impossibility for the month of December in Judea. The geography and climate of Israel are very specific. Bethlehem, located in the mountainous region of Judea, has a harsh winter. The month of December, which corresponds to the Jewish month of Kislev or Tevet, is marked by cold rains, frosts, and temperatures that frequently approach zero at night. In exceptional years, it may even snow, but no sensible shepherd in Israel would keep his flocks out in the open fields during the nights of December. The ancient custom, which can still be observed in some traditional cultures of the Middle East, dictated that the flocks that were kept in the fields from the spring after Passover until the beginning of the first rains in October, around October, as soon as the rainy and cold season began. Known in the scriptures as the first rains, the animals were gathered into corrals, caves, or shelters for protection. The fact that the shepherds were in the fields, watching over the flocks at night, is a strong indication that the birth occurred during a time of milder weather, probably between spring and early autumn, but definitely not in the dead of winter. Beyond the issue of the shepherds, there is the logistical issue of the census. Luke 2:1 tells us that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. Joseph and Mary had to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem, a journey of approximately 130 to 150 kilometers, depending on the route, walking, or on the back of an animal. This trip would take about a week. Caesar Augustus was known for being an extremely shrewd and efficient administrator. The Roman Empire thrived on order and tax collection. It is highly unlikely that Rome would decree a census that required the entire population to travel to their hometowns in the middle of winter. The roads would be muddy and difficult. The cold would be a deterrent for families, especially the elderly and children, and agriculture would be at a standstill. Forcing a population that was already rebellious and difficult to govern, the Jews to travel under adverse weather conditions would be an administrative error and an invitation to revolt. Roman censuses were typically conducted at times when the harvest was over and the weather still allowed for safe travel, that is, at the end of summer or the beginning of autumn. The chronological key: if December is unlikely, what would be the correct date? To solve this enigma, we need to look at a character who seems secondary in the Christmas story, but who holds the key to the calendar. Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. The Gospel of Luke allows us to calculate the approximate date of Jesus' birth based on the pregnancy of Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother. We know that Jesus was born about 6 months after John. In Luke 1:26, the angel Gabriel appears to Mary and says that Elizabeth, her cousin, is already in her 6th month of pregnancy. Therefore, if we find out when John the Baptist was born, we just need to add 6 months to find the birth of Jesus. The crucial clue is in Luke 1:5. There was in the time of Herod, king of Judea, a priest named Zechariah of the order of Abijah. To understand this, we need to go back to the Old Testament. King David, in 1 Chronicles 24, organized the priests into 24 shifts or divisions to serve in the temple throughout the year. Each shift served for 1 week, twice a year. In addition, all shifts served together during the 3 great pilgrimage festivals: Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. The division of Abijah was 8th in order, 1 Chronicles 24:10. The Jewish religious year begins in the month of Nisan, March and April. In the spring, let's do the math. The first shift was seen in the first week of Nisan, the second shift in the second week, the third week was Passover, where everyone served. Then the count resumed. Following this rigorous mathematical logic, Zechariah's 8th shift would fall in the first rotation of the year, sometime between the end of the Jewish month of Liar and the beginning of Sivan, approximately between mid-May and mid-June in our calendar. Luke tells us that when the days of his ministry were completed, Zechariah returned home and his wife Elizabeth conceived. Luke 1:23-24. This places the conception of John the Baptist at the end of June. Now let's move forward in the calendar. If John the Baptist was conceived at the end of June, he was born 2 months later, in March, April of the following year. Interestingly, this places the birth of John the Baptist close to the Jewish Passover. This is theologically fascinating, as the Jews expect Elijah to come at Passover, and Jesus said that John the Baptist was the Elijah who was to come. Now the final piece of the puzzle. Jesus is 6 months younger than John. If John was born in March, April Passover, we add 6 months. This takes us to the month of September or October. This is the most likely time window for the birth of Jesus. In the Jewish calendar, this corresponds to the month of Tishrei, and this is where the theological beauty explodes before our eyes. For Tishrei is the month of the autumn festivals, the Feast of Tabernacles. The Word became flesh. The hypothesis that Jesus was born in September-October is not just a mathematical deduction based on priestly shifts. It aligns perfectly with biblical typology and the symbolism of the Lord's feasts. God does nothing randomly. Jesus died at Passover as the Passover lamb. The Holy Spirit descended at Pentecost. The harvest festival would make it very consistent that the birth of the Messiah also coincided with a biblical feast. In September-October, the Feast of Tabernacles occurs, the Sukkot. This was the most joyous feast of the Jewish year, celebrating the final harvest and remembering the time when God dwelt in tents with his people in the desert. The Apostle John, in writing the prologue to his gospel, uses very specific language in John 1:14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Greek word used for dwelt is skeno, which literally means pitched his tent or tabernacle. John, being Jewish, was probably making an intentional play on words. Jesus is the true tabernacle of God, who came to dwell with men. If Jesus was born during the Feast of Tabernacles, several details of the birth narrative take on a new meaning. There was no room for them in the inn. Luke 2:7. Bethlehem is very close to Jerusalem, about 8 to 9 kilometers away. During the Feast of Tabernacles, all Jewish men were required to go to Jerusalem. The city became overcrowded, and the overflow of pilgrims filled neighboring towns like Bethlehem. The lack of vacancies in the inns would be much more explainable during a major pilgrimage festival than simply because of a census or on an ordinary day in December. The manger, during the Feast of Tabernacles, is where the Jews build temporary shelters, sukkahs, to live. Animal shelters and enclosures were often cleaned and used as extensions to accommodate pilgrims. The angel tells the shepherds, "Behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy." Succoth was known biblically as the season of our joy. Therefore, the evidence strongly points to the birth of Jesus in the autumn during the Feast of Tabernacles. He came to tabernacle with us. He is Emmanuel, God with us, fulfilling the prophecy of the feast that celebrates the divine dwelling. So why December 25th? If the evidence points to autumn, September, October, how did the whole world end up celebrating Christmas on December 25th? The answer is not in the Bible, but in church history and Roman politics. In the first 3 centuries of Christianity, the birth of Jesus was not an important feast. The early church focused on death and resurrection. Easter, the birthday of martyrs and saints, was considered the day of their death, their birth into heaven, not the day they were physically born. However, as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire and began to become the dominant religion, a cultural conflict arose. Rome had major pagan festivals in December. The most famous was Saturnalia, December 17th to 23, a festival of revelry, gift-giving, and feasting. Soon after, on December 25th, the Dis Natalis Sols Invicta, the birth of the unconquered sun, was celebrated. This festival celebrated the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the moment when the days began to get longer again, symbolizing the sun's victory over darkness. When Emperor Constantine ceased the persecution and Christianity became accepted and then official, the church faced a pastoral dilemma: how to remove newly converted Christians from the pagan festivals they loved to celebrate. The strategy adopted was to Christianize the calendar. Instead of prohibiting the midwinter festival, the church substituted the object of worship. Instead of celebrating the birth of the physical sun, Christians would begin to celebrate the birth of the Son of Righteousness. Malachi 4:2, the true light of the world, Jesus Christ. The prophetic mandate in Zechariah 14, chapter 14 of Zechariah, describes the physical return of Jesus Christ to the Mount of Olives and the beginning of his millennial kingdom, where he will reign as king over all the earth. Zechariah 14:9. In this context, he establishes a universal and liturgical law. And it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Zechariah 14:16. Participation is not optional. The nations that refuse to go up to Jerusalem to worship the King and celebrate the feast will be punished with a lack of rain. Zechariah 14:17. There is strong biblical evidence based on the chronology of the priesthood of Zechariah, father of John the Baptist, and the climate of Judea, which points to the birth of Jesus, the incarnation in September, October, coinciding with the Feast of Tabernacles. The meaning of the feast. The Apostle John says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, John 1:14. The Greek word for dwelt, skynos, literally means pitched a tent or tabernacle. The millennial purpose. By requiring all nations to celebrate this feast in his kingdom, Jesus not only fulfills the commandment of the law, but also compels the world to celebrate his birth, the day he tabernacled as a man, his presence, the fact that he is now physically tabernacling in Jerusalem. Therefore, the Feast of Tabernacles in the millennium will be the universal celebration of Emmanuel, God with us, recognizing that the King who was humbly born is the same one who now rules the universe with joy and justice. Will the calendar be corrected, the true Christmas of the King, in its original date and purpose? Conclusion: does the date matter? After analyzing the shifts of the priests, the climate of Judea, the biblical feasts and Roman history, the most solid conclusion is that Jesus was born in October, probably during the Feast of Tabernacles, September-October, and not in winter. But does this invalidate our Christmas? Not at all. Christianity is a historical faith based on real events, but it is not a legalistic faith bound to rigid liturgical dates in the same way as the ancient ceremonial system. The fact that we celebrate on December 25th serves as a testimony to the victory of the gospel over paganism. What matters is not the precision of the calendar, but the reality of the event. Knowing that Jesus was probably born during the Feast of Tabernacles enriches our worship. It reminds us that God is not a distant being. He is a God who tabernacles, who pitches his tent in the midst of our filth and pain to bring us joy. It reminds us that his coming was orchestrated with divine precision from the beginning of time, aligned with the feasts that he himself instituted for Moses. Therefore, when you see the lights of December, remember the conception of light. Remember the birth of the one who came to dwell among us, whether in December or October. The truth remains the same. Today, in the city of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. The date is a detail. The birth is a miracle that changed history.